It's good to see you this morning. I've been speaking to you, whether you've got the theme of it or not, I've been speaking to you about choices. About choices. And the first message that I preached to you was I talked about Paul and Silas being locked up in prison, and because they had to cast out a spirit out of a young girl that was a fortune teller. Now her slave owners have lost their income, and so they're put in prison. And what does Paul and Silas do in the middle of the night? They begin to sing praises unto God. And I told you that you have a choice. Your chains can break your praise, or your praise can break your chains. You choose which. And then, not only that, I told you about how that now Paul is waiting to be executed, but he's really waiting to go before the Roman people that he's got to go see. And so he says that I'm chained between two guards. But he also said, in that he said, I choose these chains because I'm here because of preaching the gospel. And then he looked at it, and his mentality is you're looking at me saying, yep, well, Paul is chained between two guards. Paul says, no, I choose to believe that these two guards are chained to me. It's a difference. And he said, you get to choose. And then I spoke to you about storms last week, how that the disciples were in a storm. And storms can come and they're circumstantial. They just happen. They're emotion. You're emotional because your emotions get out of whack and you forget what you're trying to do. And then there are theological things that happen. What's happening is not what I've been taught or what I believe. So I said to you, are you worried about the wrong things? You have a choice. Jesus said, why are you afraid of the winds and the waves? And then he spoke to the wind and the waves, and immediately he rebuked them, brought them back to order. The Bible said they were terrified of him. Now they've done forgot about the waves and the sea. Who is this that when he speaks, these things happen? So are you worried about the wrong thing? And I talked to you about, the first message was about chain. Chain is a choice that I make. If I make a choice, I'm trying to teach my grandkids, if you make choices, there's going to be consequences, good or bad. Consequences. Choice. And if I make a choice, let me tell you what's going to happen. Choice becomes a habit. And sooner or later, a habit then will become automatic. And then what happens after it's automatic, it becomes your identity. And if it lasts long enough, it becomes your nature. This is just who I am. I can't help the way I act. This is just who I am. That goes both ways, because when you make a choice that I'm going to follow God, I'm going to make a choice that I'm going to not worry about the wrong thing. I'm going to make a choice that I'm going to let my praise break my chains. I'm not going to let the chains break my praise. Then it becomes automatic. And then not only does it becomes automatic, it becomes our identity. And it becomes our nature. This is who I am. So I want to talk to you along those lines again today. I want to talk to you about what do you do when God is taking too long? What do you do when God's taking too long? I'm going to be looking at Habakkuk chapter 3, but I want to give you some information before we get to Habakkuk chapter 3. Verses 17 through 19. But let me fill you in just a little bit. So what do you do when God's taking too long? Anybody here today feel like God's been taking too long in your life? Oh, 3 or 4 of us. The rest of you, you're lying, or God's just not doing anything at all. Or maybe God's quick for you. He's just never been what I think quick sometimes. He's only quick when you need him quick. Most of the majority of the time, I think God's taking too long. The first thing, the prophet Habakkuk's only 3 chapters. Minor prophet. The first thing the prophet tells us is that if you were to read these chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, God's taking too long, chapter 1. God is taking too long to come through. God, I believe in your stuff, but my word, God, you're slow. Now, this is Habakkuk speaking in chapter 1 of Habakkuk in the Old Testament. The second thing that the prophet tells us is that God's movements were confusing. He couldn't make sense of it. So God responds in chapter 1, verse 5, and this is what he said. Look at the nations and observe and be utterly astounded. For I'm doing something in your days that you will not believe when you hear about it. Sounds good, don't it? You ain't got to read the rest of what the prophet wrote. First of all, he says, God, you're too slow. You're too slow. Now you're confusing me. Here's what we know so far. The problem is, Habakkuk is saying in chapter 1, here's the problem. God, you're taking too long. In other words, God, you're moving too slow. Secondly, I can't figure you out. The inability to understand what you're doing because it seems contradictory. So God, when he says to him that, look, I'm going to do something in your days that you will not believe when you hear about it, he's giving him a prophecy. God is going to raise up an evil people called the Babylonians to discipline his people in verse 12, chapter 1. So, it takes on a different meaning, doesn't it? I'm going to do something in your days that you will not believe when you hear about it. I'm going to let a group of people that are ruthless, evil, that are mean and ornery, I'm going to let them discipline you. And this causes Habakkuk to say, in chapter 1, verse 13, here's how he responds to God. Your eyes are too pure to look upon evil, and you cannot tolerate wrongdoing. So why do you tolerate those who are treacherous? Why are you silent while one who is wicked swallows up one who is more righteous than himself? That leads me to the third thing that Habakkuk is saying. It's not fair. You ever thought that? God, this ain't fair. If you haven't, if you'll stay a Christian long enough, somewhere down the line, anybody ever, just one person, have you ever felt like it ain't fair? So all of you raise your hand on that. God, this ain't fair. Now you understand Habakkuk feels. God, you're gonna let somebody that's horrible come in and discipline. That ain't fair. And I can hear Habakkuk, God, I may be bad, but they worse than me. You ever done that? God, now, God, I may not be the best one on the block, but God, I'm better than they are. Look what you did for them. Oh, we justify everything we try to do. But you're using them more than you're using me. That's not fair. Here again, what the prophet is saying, you're taking too long. I can't figure out what you're doing. And the little bit I do know is that it ain't fair. Hear me today. You're not the only one who thinks these thoughts about God. Now, it might be hard to say it because you'll sound unspiritual if you get up here and say, God, you sure are taking long, so I'm unspiritual, because I think God takes a long time sometimes. Sometimes I can't figure God out. And sometimes I've had to say, God, it ain't fair. It's easier to say, oh, it's going to be all right. Whew, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. Don't worry. Just pat him on the back. It'll be all right. He's going to fix it. He's able. Oh, and you can even go, he's a way maker. But then you get by yourself. And you start thinking real thoughts. God ain't going to do nothing for them. He ain't going to do it. I know he's not going to do it. If you're thinking real thoughts and you believe in him and you know he's real, there are times when you're going to raise some questions like, why are you moving too slow, God? Why are you taking so long, God? Why are you so confusing, God? Because what you're doing contradicts what I know about you. That's the hardest one that we have to face. But the good news is this: you're not alone. The prophet had to struggle with the methodologies of God. Chapter 3, verse 2, he says, Lord, I have heard the report about you, and I stand in awe of your deeds. Revive your work in these years. In your wrath, remember mercy. Let me say it again. What the prophet was saying. God, you're taking too long. God, I'm confused. God, it's not fair. And then he gives us a fourth one in that. I'm afraid, God. Will you, in your wrath, remember mercy? Now, this is a combination of negatives that he's in the pit. In chapter 1, he's telling us these things ain't working because God ain't on time, and he's moving slow, and I can't understand him. I'm afraid, and it's complicated. And then this combination, he's in despair. And physically, Habakkuk's a wreck. Listen to chapter 3, verse 16. I heard, and my heart pounded. He's saying, God, when you said you're going to bring up the Babylonians and it ain't fair, my heart pounded within inside of me. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones and my legs trembled. I can't hardly stand up. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come from the nation that is invading us. So now he's come to the point, God, I'll just sit back and wait. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm just going to wait. I don't know what else to do. I want to say to you today, physically, are you done? Are you falling apart? Is your life full of chaos? Are you uncertain about the future in front of you? That was Habakkuk's problem. And what he was looking forward to wasn't very exciting. We're going to come in and we're going to discipline you, because the future was looking dim for him. I don't know if I can take another year like this one. I don't see much hope. I don't see much hope for improvement. Anybody feel like Habakkuk today? After the prophet has taken 3.5 chapters to tell you his struggles, his frustration, his confusion, and his fear, he comes down to 3 verses and he ends up on a peak. Now let's read the text, since you have the context of the text. Though the fig trees does not bud, and there is no fruit on the vines. Though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food. Though the flocks disappear from the pen and there are no herds in the stalls. Yet I will celebrate in the Lord. Can I go back to 17? Though the fig tree does not bud and there's no fruit on the vines, and the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, we're going to be in a famine. The flocks disappear from the pen. There are no herds in the stalls. We got no meat, no vegetables. Yet I will celebrate in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord, my Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like those of a deer and enables me to walk on mountain heights. I was hunting with Paul Long a few years ago, and we were up on the east side of Georgia hunting. And Paul shot a deer, and the deer went down, and the deer got up and ran. And so Paul called me and said, I got a deer down. Can you come help me? Let's find him. And we started looking for him. This deer's been wounded. He's bleeding. There's blood everywhere. We pick up the trail of blood that morning or that afternoon. We picked up the blood trail, and we followed him. We followed this deer to a creek. And the creek might have been 2 feet, 3 feet deep. But the other side of the creek was an embankment at least 10 feet high. The blood trail stopped there. That deer went through that creek and climbed that straight up to the other side. We could not pick up a trail on the other side. And when I was looking at that, the Lord said, that's what I do for my saints when you get wounded. And the devil's coming after you and he's trailing you, smelling you. And you come to a point and you come to a place where it looks like it's uncrossable. There is something inside of you. My strength will give your feet stability that you can climb on the mountains and not fall off. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. So that's the context. Now, let me give you three things. From a non-Christian standpoint, there are three options generally given by the world or people who look at negative situations in their lives. Number one, if you resign yourself to that's the way it is. That's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be. Nothing's going to change. How you doing? What's going on? You got a few minutes so I can tell you. That's just the way it is. Nothing's ever going to change. It's going to be always that bad. And that's the way people deal with life when they seem to offer no future at all. We'll just, I'm just barely making it. Mr. Ted Ball. I'm just, for you that know what I'm talking about, I'm just barely making it. For you don't know who he is, go look him up. Second one's detachment. Detachment when life throws curveballs at you and you don't know what to do and things are going out of well and you're like Habakkuk. The first thing you do is distract yourself. So you come home from the job at work and life is falling apart and you and your spouse are having a tough time. Let me tell you what's the best thing to do. Just turn on the television and sit there and zone out. Whatever you like to watch, just watch it. Watch some TV. But if that don't work, go see your doctor. Doctor, I'm really struggling really bad. I can buy them off the street, or can you give them to me? Local pharmacy on the street corner, or will you give me some stuff? I just need something, Doc. I can't sleep at night. I just got these voices, and I hear them crying out all night long. Can you help me, doctor? And then you start taking it, and then what happens is the next month you use your 30-day supply up in about 2 weeks. Oh, I didn't mean to get on it, that's bad, ain't it? Talking about us getting hung on the party hardy. that'll help you get over it. I'll just party hardy. I don't want to think about it. I just get on my four-wheeler and play in the mud. Doc will go fishing. That's a good one, ain't it? You got your own stuff. I'll just go in the bedroom, turn the light off, and cover my head up with the covers, and I ain't coming out the morning, and it's only 4:30 in the afternoon. The only problem with detachment, it's camouflaged. It doesn't fix anything. It just hides it for a little while, just a little while. And you have got to constantly be entertained to not think about it. But yet you always know it's still down underneath your feet. Third thing is man up. Man up. All right. I can do that. The way you deal with the uncertainties of life, you take it like a man. Now, I ain't just talking about men. Women, you can take it like a man, too. I can handle this. I can poke your chest. I can fix this. I'm not going to let life get me down. That's positive. Oh, I know it's positive thinking, but I'm better than that. Your life may be miserable, not going anywhere. That's okay. That's okay because I can man up. Pep talk's good. It won't last. It won't last. You left here last Sunday and the Lord did something for you in the service. You got fired up from the message, from the singing. And after 5 minutes after you leave, you're telling yourself, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it this week. I got this pep talk going. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. It ain't enough. That ain't enough. The question I have for you today is, what do you do when God is taking too long? What do you do when uncertainty is in front of you? What do you do when you're afraid? What do you do when you feel like you're falling apart? You can follow 3 options given. Resign. It's the way it's going to be. That won't do. You can detach yourself. It's only camouflage. Or you can man up, which only lasts so long. But Habakkuk said in chapter 3, verse 18, I will rejoice. I will exalt in the Lord. Even though I have questions, even though I have my confusion, even though I don't see solution number 1 in sight, or 2 or 3 or anything, God, and maybe God doesn't make sense, I'm going to celebrate in the house of God. Hallelujah. Now that's what Habakkuk's telling all of us to do. Celebrate. Celebrate what? I'm falling apart. He said, celebrate. That means I'm going to trust in the reliability of God. Even when I can't see Him, He's still working. Even when I can't feel Him, He's still working. And I don't understand what He's doing because He's not working the way I wanted it to work. I'm going to choose to believe in the reliability of God even in the dark. Learning to trust God in the dark when you have no support for your faith other than who you know Him to be. Because that's the only content you have. You know who you know Him to be. And here's what I've had to learn in my walk, just as Habakkuk did. There are 2 things that I've been able to stand on. When my world falls apart, I do forget them. Yes, I do. And then somewhere along the line, I have to get back into the temple. I have to get back in the house of the Lord. And I got to celebrate a little bit. And I got to forget those things. There's 2 things that are very important. It's His character and His work. His character and His work. This is critical. Faith is only meaningful to the degree that its object has meaning. Watch this. What is the object of your faith? It's a meaningless term. If you were to tell me what you were believing, belief only matters when the object has substance. We respond to our circumstances because our circumstances affect us. Habakkuk has to make a choice. And it is the same choice that you have to make today as a believer. And that choice is whether you're going to choose to believe God. That's the question. I don't know how many times my wife has asked me this question. Do you believe God or not? Sometimes I think I've been too slow in answering that question for her because I'm thinking about it. And then she'll, I can't believe you just couldn't say, you don't believe God, do you? And then she you know, hey, everybody needs one of those kinds that talks to you hard like that. So here's what I want you to learn that I learned the hard way, and so did Habakkuk. I have to believe 2 things about God. There were 2 things that keep me afloat, and that's His character. That is what He's like. What He told me is what He's like. Now, where do I find that out? I have to believe it in the dark when I can't see Him, when I don't feel Him. But since He can't lie, it must be truth. What did I tell you last week that I've learned about faith? Faith is just believing that God is going to do what He said. That's faith. That's what I told you last week. And so what do I have to believe? I have to believe that there's 2 things that I have to believe in God. When my whole world falls apart, there's 2 things that are going to hold me up. His character. You got to know that you can count on His character. You can count on it. Laverne's already told us you can count on God. Second thing that I have to believe about God is His works. This has to do with what He's already done for others, whether you or someone else in the past. You got to know what He did yesterday. Habakkuk in chapter 3, from verse 3 to verse 15, rehearses what God did yesterday. So Habakkuk is saying, I don't know what I'm going to do, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to go to the house of the Lord. And he started reminding God, and he's rehearsing, this is what God did. This is what God did. This is what God did. I told you about going to a restaurant, and one of the managers there had lost a child. Her name is Christina. And her and her husband wanted a child. They really wanted a child. And she lost the child. And Pam and Timmy know the young lady and have a relationship with her. And they speak back and forth. And the whole time they're talking, I've told you this, but I won't tell you again. We were sitting at the table, and the whole time that this lady, she got introduced to us, but she's talking to Pam and Timmy because she knows them, and the Lord is speaking to me about this lady. And when it was all over with, I called Timmy, texted Timmy, and I said, this is what the Lord was saying about me. Can you and Pam, do you feel comfortable enough to tell her what I've told you that the Lord spoke to me to do about having a child? So Pam and Timmy sent me a picture last week, wasn't it? And she's past the part where she first lost the first child, and you can tell she's pregnant. She's got a little old belly, and she sent it to them. And I looked at that, and I thought, God, boy, you're good. And so that's one of my stories that I get to rehearse. God can do anything. You need those kind of stories that God can do anything. And so Habakkuk's rehearsing what God did yesterday. But what does he do? He's saying, he talks about when they came out of Egypt. He's talking about God's people, and he said they got to the Red Sea. It was hopeless. There was no way they were going to get through. And what happens? God opened the Red Sea. And then he began to talk about David and Goliath. What do you need to know? Why do you need to know what God did yesterday? Why is it so important for you to know what he did in the past, the Bible? And you need to know what he's done in the Bible. You need to know what God's done for your mama. You need to know what God's done for your friends. You need to know what God's going to do for you and will do and has done. That's what will make you through, because you can trust in his works. Now, why do I need to know what he did? Because he still can. When the Lord spoke to me, started singing to me, two things he said to me. He said, I want you to know emphatically, you never forget what I'm going to tell you. He said, I'm not poor, and I still heal. That's the two things he wanted me to know. Because see, that was the two things that I was grappling with, struggling with. And he said, I'm not poor, and I still heal. He does not change. His methods will vary, but his abilities don't. Chapter 2, verse 20. But the Lord is in the holy temple. Let the whole earth be silent in his presence. The Lord is in his holy temple. The whole earth be silent in his presence. Do you know what that verse means? Shut up. Since there's no kids in here, I can say that. Be quiet. Now, the verses before chapter 2, verse 20, they're talking about dumb idols. That's what Habakkuk calls them. The people look to these dumb idols for solutions. These idols can't speak. They can't talk because they're dumb. Not only that, they got to set them up on their shelf and then go over and talk to them. But the Lord, Habakkuk said, those dumb idols, they're just something sitting on your shelf or something you've got buried and hid. But the Lord, He said, He's in the holy temple. Let the whole earth, that's you and me, be silent before Him. Why do I need to know that? When you can't figure it out, don't get a headache over it. Don't stay up all night trying to figure it out. All right, I'm going to take that advice. How about you? If there's anything God spoke to me this week, He said, God knows how to tell you what He wants you to know. And if He has not informed you of anything more than He has informed you already, just go to sleep. Stop fussing. Stop complaining. And be silent before the Lord. Now, what is Habakkuk saying? He's saying, in other words, let him do what he's going to do. Leave God alone. He's not a dumb idol. He's not a lifeless being. God is in the holy temple. Let the earth be silent. Now, I got to break. That's not enough for me. So what do you do when you get in the temple? You do one thing. You worship. So in your confusion, what do? God, I'm so confused. I don't know to go left, right, straight, forward, backwards, down, up, circle. I'm confused. What do? God, I love you. I magnify you. I adore you. I praise you. There's none like you. You're higher than the highest mountain. You can come up with all these kinds of things. In your confusion, you worship. In your lack of clarity, God, I don't know what to do, you worship. In your emptiness, when you don't have a feeling whatsoever to worship, what do? You worship. When you're in despair, what do? You worship. You simply, Lord, you simply say, Lord, all I can do in your temple is say, I adore you. Because I have no explanations for anything that's going on right now. None. Habakkuk said, the Lord is in the holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before you. So what is Habakkuk saying to us? When we feel like Habakkuk's feeling here, he's saying, he's calling for an act of faith. What is that? I'm just believing God's word. So I'm going to close. I'm going to believe in His character. I'm going to believe His works. There was a storm. The disciples were in a boat by themselves, and the storm arose, and they felt like they were dying, and they were drowning, and they look out there amongst the waves and the storm that's happening, and they thought they saw a ghost. And Jesus said, don't be afraid, it's I. And Peter in the boat, he says to them, really, is that you? Can I come out there and walk on water with you? I'm trying to think like Peter thinks. You're doing it, so can I come out there and walk with you on the water? Since you're doing it, I'd like to walk on water with you. Can I come out there and walk on water with you? And what does Jesus say? Come on. Peter stepped out. That's risky business. Why? First of all, there's a storm. He steps out, and what does he do? He walks on water. Peter's walking on top of the storm. And the Bible says he begins to be distracted by the wind. And now the waves are He's on top of the water, but maybe the waves just kind of roll by and maybe his feet disappear for a second, but he's still walking. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I'm kind of thinking. Or maybe he's just walking up the hill like a boat. Or maybe he's just walking. I don't know. But he's walking. And what does that mean? He's being distracted now. He's looking at his circumstances. Boy, that's a big wave coming. He's supposed to be walking this way, but he's watching this wave that, my word, that's a big wave. We were down in the Bahamas on a cruise. Brendan, Jimmy, and Paul and Beverly went to the beach with us. And my goodness gracious, the waves were big for there, and they were rough. And Brendan, Jimmy get in them. I'm making my way out there, but they're already in them. And those waves, they took, Brendan just rolled her, like a bowling ball. And she thinks she's drowning and says Debbie was laughing at her. Or did she say me? I think it was you. And she said, you wouldn't even come. I said, I was coming. But them waves was awful big. And she got up and she had sand all caked in her hair. I'm out there drowning and you didn't even help me. And then those waves were horrible. And then we got down there, Laverne and Hawaii. And those waves were big waves, huge waves. I'm not talking this wave. And it knocked Laverne down. And Laverne is shores up here, and she's just laying flat down on the ground because the wave kind of come in and went out, but she can't get up. And I'm looking out across here, and there's a wave as big as the curtain, and she's laying down, and I'm thinking, God, that water's just going to go right in her nose. She's going to drown, and help me, Laverne. Come on, Laverne. And the sand has kind of got her sucked in, and I'm trying to pull her up, and I'm thinking, and I was honest. I looked at her and says, is there anything you need me to tell anybody? I just knew she was a goner. We got her up. She didn't drown. She's here. I can tell you what she said. I ain't going back to the beach with you guys, and she didn't. Paul and I were in Hawaii, and nobody got in the water but me and Paul. And those waves were way taller than the curtain. This curtain's 8 foot, I think, but the waves were way taller than that. And Paul and I didn't understand what we were supposed to do, so we'd just stand there with our backs, and then when it hits you, just and you wind up way up here, and the tide goes out. And let's do it again, Paul. So we went out there, and we'd stand, and we'd get a big wave, and it hits you, and you. And about after 10 minutes, I said, I've had enough, Paul. Them waves that beat the fire out of me, and I'm all scratched up. And I said, let's go home. Now, why are you telling those all them? Them waves are powerful stuff. And suck you right. Now, Peter's walking on them. And what's happening? He's got distracted. He's not looking at Jesus. He sees that big wave coming. And we were getting out of the water, and there was a wave coming. It looked like it was 10 feet above Paul's head. And Paul is trying to run in the water to get ahead of it. He didn't make it. But it rolled him, and he come up there. And when you get caught under them, you think you're going to die. And because you're there for, it seemed like a long time. But Peter now is looking at these waves. He's focusing on the circumstances. When he took his eyes and off of the Lord and he began to focus on his situation, he says to himself, you fool, what are you doing out here walking on the water? He's talking to himself. You're going to drown, you're going to die. He was doing good as long as he was talking to Jesus. He's walking on water, talking to Jesus. The moment he started looking at how bad his situation, the Bible said he began to sink. What did he do? Oh, before I do that, let me tell you this. Every time you take your eyes off the Lord and you put them on your circumstance, you sink. He began to sink. And then it dawned on him, If I don't change my focus, I'm going to keep going down, down, down. I'm going to drown. And the Bible said he looked up and he said, Lord, save me. When he changed his focus back to what God had stated in the first place, he began to walk on water again. Are you tired of seemingly going under? You come in on Sunday and somehow or another you get this pep talk and you feel real good. And you get up on Monday and by Tuesday you're sinking, Wednesday you're sinking, Thursday you're sinking, Friday you're sinking, Saturday you think you're going to drown. I've come by to tell you today that God is inviting you to look up. God has come by to invite you to look up. Keep your eyes on him. He may not get rid of the storm, but you can walk on it instead of it walking on you. Now, the question I have for you today is, will you choose to believe God in the situation that you're in today? Will you trust, will you choose, will you believe God no matter how bad the situation looks? Will you believe God this morning for whatever it is that you're facing? Will you believe God that he can do what he said he would do? Father, this morning, as we've come into your house today, God, I do believe there are people here that are like Habakkuk that said, Lord, it seems like you're taking a long time. I'm confused. I don't understand. I'm not sure what's going on. Not only that, I'm afraid. I'm afraid, God, that I'm going to drown. But Habakkuk says, I'm going to go to the house and I'm going to worship. Lord, for someone that's in a place today that doesn't know what I don't know if there's someone here today, God, that doesn't even know if they'll have groceries to last to the end of the week. God, I don't know if there's somebody here today that when this tank of gas burn up, they don't have any money left to buy gas for the rest of the week because they got paid at the beginning of the month and there's nothing left. I don't know that, God. But I know, God, that I can trust your character and your works. And I can believe in what you said you will do. So I ask of you today, God, whoever's here this morning that's facing something that's just detrimental, and it looks like they're dying in the process of the storm they're going through, Lord, I ask of you today, Holy Spirit, grasp a hold of them now and let your presence be in their life, that they would choose to believe the word of the Lord. And if there's nothing else, let them just begin to worship you all week long. Let them begin to worship you. Let them begin to worship you.